Again, I wanted to welcome you this morning. I'm Brian Muys with American Public University System, and I have the distinct pleasure of introducing two out of our three panelists and also two of my esteemed colleagues from APUS. To my immediate left, Wanda Curlee, who is Associate Professor with the School of Business, and to her left in turn is Dr. Oliver Hedgepeth, who is a professor also with our School of Business. His primary focus on transportation and logistics management, as you might have guessed, given the nature of our topic this morning. So, Oliver, I think you have, I'm not sure if you have slides or prepared remarks, but I'm going to turn this over to you.
That's why they tell me to bring this thing. Okay. Okay. Hello. Okay. Is this thing on?
It's hooked into.
It is? Okay. Thank you very much. I am Oliver Hedgepeth, professor of logistics, American Public University, American Military University, and former professor of logistics, global logistics from the University of Alaska. Transportation, disaster logistics has been a focus of a lot of my work in innovation technology, destructive innovation. I've seen innovation in computers, as many of you may have. Many of you may not have. I started in the computer world in 1967, and I've seen what computers and social media have grown into. One of the things that intrigues me about the driverless cars, or artificial intelligence cars, as I heard the discussions, is that there are, I was writing some notes down, creative destructions that are going to happen. We've been talking about artificial intelligence in terms of practical help for humans since about 1984. Now, it's been around a long time, but in 1984, okay, tell you what, where's it down there? Move to the next slide. Okay, next slide. Next slide. That's a question we're going to talk. Next slide. Next slide. That's it.
Okay.
Okay. That's a slide. One slide, so you don't have to fall asleep. Okay, there's a lot of things on this slide. We decided to pack it all in. One thing that drones will do is deliver something the last mile. I've been focusing on the last mile for a long time. Sir, the guy there with the nice coat on, I like that coat. What's the last mile, do you think? I'm a teacher, so I ask questions. I'm sorry. What's the last mile to you?
The last mile is the final link of the distribution.
In what sense?
In getting it into the hands of the users.
Like mail coming to your house? UPS, that's the last mile. And drone technology is clearly one of those last mile things. I'll stand and walk around. Stand up, walk around. Last mile, little drone technology, kind of cool, all right? And the drone technology does tend to offer opportunities for business investments for transportation in this sector. There are 5 modes of transportation. One is air delivery. One's trucks. You got rail. You got a few other things like sea, and you got pipelines. Pipeline doesn't seem to be a last mile delivery concept. However, the drones are, and it's very exciting. Amazon's working on these. A lot of other companies are working on it. Really cool technology. You see something come out of our distribution center, warehouse, flies over the treetops, lands, drops it. Nice advertisement. It could deliver your groceries. And then you don't need to go to the supermarket. Supermarkets are under attack already. The food supply chain and retail supermarkets, their profits are around 3%. Their margins, I mean, very low. I don't know why anybody would invest in a supermarket unless you really got a good lock on your food distribution system. You own the food, you own the crops, you own the trucks. If you own it all, then you'll probably make it. Now, a lot of the major grocery stores do own a lot of these markets together. But that last mile is very important. And the last mile is going to destroy some things we take for granted. Look at all the grocery stores that have changed hands already for retail reasons. But this does threaten a lot of people. Now, there are still some last mile technologies that some of you may not know about because I happen to be fortunate enough to live with it for 10 years. I taught in University of Alaska. We have last mile things you wouldn't believe. Dog sleds. You know we still deliver mail by dog sled? Right to your door. Trains. In Alaska, the train will go down this one track. It's got one track. Goes all the way from Anchorage to Fairbanks. And you take a nice ride, and it will stop. Someone may be flagging it down. It will deliver their mail. You've paid for a nicer excursion. Well, part of your excursion is the last mile for them to pick up their box once a year. I think Ontario, Wisconsin, there's a girl jumping off a boat. She's delivering mail, old-fashioned way. Oh yeah, St. Petersburg, Florida. See the bicycle? They still deliver mail by bicycle. Nothing's threatening there, but all this artificial intelligence that can help us with driverless cars, drone delivery, will have some impact on the business model itself. Now, downstairs, I was just listening. Sorry I'm late. I was just intrigued by what was going on about EMT technology, and I come from the baby boom generation where we were worried about nuclear attack, EMT. One of my degrees is engineering, nuclear engineering, so I played around with that. And my first career in the government had to do with EMT, nuclear energy, another department. And so I was worried about it, listening to it. That's why I was late. And one of the things that struck me that I wanted to bring to your attention, besides this technology, is, we have an EMT. It's a supply chain. It is all logistics. And these EMTs are going to be impacting many of our supply chains along the way. And the key is, like this technology, how do we anticipate the results of losing a lot of our logistics systems? The EMTs will destroy your ability to go to the bank to withdraw money. If there's an EMT attack, you won't get your money out. You want to go buy groceries? You want to go buy a hamburger? If the hamburger place is still open or someone cooking on a grill, you might not get it because of the EMT attack. That's a supply chain of money. Also a supply chain of information and communications and data transfer. So there's a lot of things that we're discussing downstairs or over here about EMTech technology. They talked about electricity transmission and distribution, and I'm hearing that term downstairs. And it's interesting that the transmission and distribution is really transportation. It's transportation. Now, there are 5 modes of transportation: air, road, sea, pipeline, rail. I got them. Okay, I teach this stuff. I should know it. But there may be a 6th mode of transportation that's emerging. Technology growth emerges, grows, creates new things, new modes of transportation, new modes of moving things. What are we transmitting? What are we moving? The data. Not just the money, but the data. I have a granddaughter who texts around 300 to 500 times a day. She wakes up, she goes to sleep with it. It is on in her bed. 3 o'clock in the morning, you hear it go off when she's visiting, and that's a new transmission mode. It's interesting. It's transporting data and information. That's how she learns what's going on in this world. There are many fail-safe things that will go wrong with artificial intelligence and driverless cars. We really fail to anticipate, not fail, wrong word. It is very difficult to anticipate how a new innovation, a new product will impact your future, your daily human life. Now, I'm a scientist. I was a scientist for AT&T also, had a nice title. And we created new things. But we created them because as a scientist, that was a cool thing to do. We created a new communications device. Look at these new things up here. Google, Amazon. You see the TV commercial for talking to this little box that turns on your lights and plays your music and does a whole bunch of neat things as it listens to you 24/7. Okay? Look at all the hacking that's going on in the world as somebody's trying to listen to you 24/7. So there's a lot of bad things that could happen here. But technology innovations is exciting. As a scientist, I love creating new things. All my science friends love creating new things. Us geeks who live in a laboratory, it's cool to make this new toy. but we really don't know the impact of creating something, say, 3M sticky notes. They tried to make glue for paper, and the scientist failed. He made the glue that's kind of like, it worked a little bit, but not enough, and it's like, let's throw this away. And someone smart enough said, you know, people just might like a piece of paper that sticks a little bit, and it made business. Anti-lock brakes was a new feature back in the, been living too long, not too long. 50s, 60s, anti-lock brakes came along for automobiles because Department of Highways people said, we're killing ourselves, driving too fast. You put on the brakes. We need technology to save our lives, cut down the death rate of automobile wrecks. And the engineers, the science engineers, created anti-lock brakes. I know they work because I tried to use them on ice in Anchorage one time when I hit a moose. You put on your brakes, you slam on brakes, and it's not going to slam on brakes. It's going to brake on its own. It goes, it stutters. It stutters. Where my old car, I just slam on brakes and you slide sideways into a ditch. Everything locks down. But I did hit a moose one time with anti-lock brakes. The thing about anti-lock brakes, they didn't save lives because the speed limit was 55 miles an hour. What's the speed limit now? I just drove up here from Richmond at a modest 70 miles an hour, okay? And I was in the slow lane. Anti-lock brakes were failing to work at 65 and 70 miles an hour. They just weren't doing what they were meant to do. People did not anticipate what was going on. I always loved the story of Star Trek. You guys know about Star Trek. I'm a Star Trek fan. I got everybody in gray hair has got to be a Star Trek fan. I always think it's interesting that the science fiction people foretold what was coming in the future. I always loved the Star Trek people where they had a little button here to do this, and it's a little cell phone. Basically, we turn around, we hold these things now. It's off. I'm nice, it's off. And they had this cell phone on their chest, and they tap it the way I tap this one with 2 fingers. And that was kind of neat, and it foretold some things. They're trying to do matter transportation. You know, they've got food dispensers that create food. You want a cup of coffee, you want a sandwich or donut, you hit something that does it. We have 3D food processors that can make those things today. We can do that. But isn't it interesting that the Starship Enterprise needed a navigator? It needed a driver in this world of artificial intelligence. They had artificial intelligence back then, whatever that was, but they still needed a driver. They needed someone to steer the Starship Enterprise. They needed a windshield. They needed to look out and see where they're going in space. Now, I've studied enough about space to be dangerous. And as I understand it, space is about 99% nothing. Those little galaxies that you're going to hit, they're like so far off, we'll all be dead many times over before we hit one. Now, there's a stray rock going around out there, but why do you need a windshield? Why do you need a driver with all this artificial intelligence that's helping you drive something? It's not that it's bad. It makes a good movie to have someone driving the ship. But artificial intelligence, it's here to stay. It's gotten better. I was the director of artificial intelligence for Army Logistics for 5 years, from 85 to 90, one of 7 AI centers in the country. And Max Sturman, the Chief of Staff of the Army, created these 7 centers. Mine was logistics. We had others for other things. And one thing he said is we need to create a discussion topic of artificial intelligence and then close the place down and let it go away and try to get the language, the definitions in people's heads so they'll start thinking how to use it, because he was worried about the human impact. What would happen if you start doing these things? And we were successful. We created a few things. But now we have artificial intelligence in here. We call it smart technology. The car I rented to drive up here is, oh God, it's so smart. I mean, it'll stop if I have somebody run in front of it, and it does a whole bunch of other things that I just talk to it, and it finds me a radio station. It is getting what we call smart technology. That's just cool programming. We just got better at programming. being able to program without using coding that we're stuck with back in the 60s and 70s. So the one thing about AI and driverless cars and driverless trucks, there will be a social and societal impact. You will lose your job. I might lose my job. Now, I'm a teacher, and I teach that you're going to lose your job. One thing about education, and I've heard it downstairs and I've heard it everywhere, as we look at this impact of technology on our future, we need to think about, as academics, now I'm an academic for the last 20 years, how to teach you something, but not how to teach you a skill. We still need to teach welders, by the way. There's a high demand for welding. That's not a new skill, that's an old skill. But there are new technologies that you need to be aware of that are coming. I don't know what they are. So in the academic world, my challenge to the academic world, to MIT, to Harvard, to us, APU, online, is when do we need to teach you something new? I don't know what to teach you. Ask Harvard and MIT. Ask them what they want to teach you so you'll guarantee you'll have a job 10 years from today. I doubt anybody will say, unless you take a job in accounting, that might be good. Accounting might still be needed. But with all the new software that's available, the smart software, it kind of does it for you. Your data, my paycheck, is all digitized. All my data, my investments, it all goes to a software place that comes back, and I send it to an accountant that's really a piece of software, and things get done. And money moves from one bank to another bank, and I don't really have to do a lot of things. But we need to understand when to teach as academics for this impact of technology. So I guess one of the things, the lessons here today is there is an impact that's going to be negative, it's destructive, but it's creative destruction. I remember when computers first came on the scene, computers were meant to add numbers and subtract numbers. This was never envisioned, what I can do with this. You were never to have FaceTime. You were never to have Facebook. You were never to text. You were to add up a bunch of numbers. You would add up a bunch of numbers, the dump columns that said, here are the ICBM missiles in the Soviet Union. Here's their nuclear yield. Oh, here's a paper map. Draw a circle of where it might be effective. Add up the numbers. Here's the population of the United States. Add up the numbers. Here's the taxes. Add up the numbers. That was the purpose of computers from the 60s, 70s, and emerging into the 80s. They started getting smarter, and somebody realized, maybe we can do a few different things. Now, there's a social impact here, too, that's happened from this technology, a logistics tool. It is a logistics tool. And the impact is, it's changed how we think. I mentioned my granddaughters, how they use texting all the time. We have Thanksgiving dinner, just had it last week. Their grandma has a rule in the house. All 12 people come, this goes away. I'm smart enough to do it. 4 of our grandchildren weren't, and so we had a little discussion because they were having it in their lap. You could hear a little thing go bing, 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 and but it interfered with the ability to hold a conversation. We're holding a conversation. He's got his phone out back there. Look at that. And that's okay. It's not wrong. I've got my phone out. We deal in a different world of multimedia, totally impact. We're trying to solve a lot of problems at one time. And maybe that's a benefit. We can solve a lot of problems at one time. We solve a lot of problems quickly, whereas back in the 60s and 70s, we solved them a little slower. It may have taken 2 months to solve a problem that we can now make a decision. Let's do it right now. Let's make a decision. Let's sign that tax bill this afternoon. I got time. I can hear the president saying right now, let's go ahead and sign the thing, okay? So there's a lot of deliberation that still needs to go on, I know, in my heart, in my mind. But things go faster now because of this technology. Transportation is part of it. There is a truck here. There's a tractor trailer with a bunch of wood on it. Okay, it's just a nice little, it's a Volvo tractor trailer, by the way. And I remember that tractor trailer because it was mine. I also, for a while, owned a trucking company for 5 years with my daughter. She was a trucker. I've got a picture of, she's like 5 foot nothing, weighs 98 pounds, and she can drive an 80,000-pound tractor trailer and do it very skillfully. And that was one of hers. But I remember being in an office one time, And the phone rang on my desk every 15 minutes, all the way into 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, from the person who owned that wood. They want to know where the tractor trailer was right now, because they were paying money for that wood to be delivered, for a home to be built. Where is it right now? Today, we don't have to worry about that. We just know where the driver is. My son knows where I am right now for this. We're locked and loaded. I know where he is. He knows where I am. It's very easy. I can give this to the driver. I know exactly where he is, as well as the person who's paying me to deliver those goods. So technology does have good impacts, but there are negative things. I don't want to be negative, but creative, destructive things that will happen. In your lifetime, in my lifetime, I've had 4 careers. I did not start out to be a professor. I guess I'm ending my last career as a professor. But you will, most of you, have 3 or 4 different careers in your life. And transportation is going to be part of it. Artificial intelligence is going to continue to impact your life. That's my opening 3-minute speech.
I knew Oliver would help us out with time. I don't know where Kandis is.
I bet she's downstairs.
Okay. Anyway, we were having a good conversation earlier with some of you, and over here you notice IoT. That's okay. And you see the brain up there, and you see Apple, Google, and Amazon. We think differently than a machine. We're taking in everything around us. Machines can take in everything around them, but they don't process information like we do. A machine will do A plus B equals C, or it can do A plus D equals Z, but it can't take in all of the information that we take in. Like I see it's a sunny day outside and I'm talking to you, and some people are paying attention, some people are not. But our minds have learned to take out what is not pertinent to what's going on in the area, whereas a machine doesn't. To it, it's all the same, unless it's programmed. And Oliver kind of alluded to that. It's programming, and we've gotten a lot better at programming. So while technology in and of itself is not bad, it's humans that make it good or bad. Nuclear technology is not bad. Humans made a nuclear bomb. Okay, but the nuclear technology itself is not bad. So I just want everybody understand that technology in and of itself is not bad. We do have to have ethical discussions about it, okay? Because if we don't have ethical discussions, we will have something with AI that happens, hopefully not like Terminator, but we might have something like that if you've seen the show Terminator. So we have to learn how to deal with AI, because machines are here to stay, no matter what you think. So I'm sure you've seen the commercial where, and I don't remember which one it is, I think it's Google, where it says, call Jim. And she just goes crazy because it says she wants to call where she works out. Well, it ends up calling Jim somebody that she doesn't want. So the machine has to learn how do we think. And it can learn over time, and that's what they're trying to input into these machines, to learn that I have a different music deck than you have. So if it hears your voice, it knows that your music deck needs to come up, not mine, okay? Or if I want to be really mean or something, I could say, Google, erase your music deck, you know? So Google has to know what it needs to do or what it doesn't need to do. My son just got Google in his, and I'm flying out there this afternoon, so I'm kind of interested to see how it's going to work, because I see it as the last part of it. Amazon's already using their technology for the last part of transportation. You can say, what is it called in Amazon? I don't even know what it's called. Alexa? Yeah, Alexa, order me X, and guess what? The next day, if you've got Prime, you've got X. Or you can say, Alexa, I want a pizza from so-and-so. And Alexa does the ordering of the pizza. So there you have transportation again. Amazon just bought grocery stores. Guess what? You can say, Alexa, I need to buy tomatoes, and I need eggs, and I need XYZ. the next day, or probably within a few hours, I would guess, or even a few minutes, you're going to have your tomatoes, eggs, and your XYZ delivered probably via drone to your house. I can't wait. I really can, and I hope I'm around to see all these drones going all over. I used to live way out in the country, and FedEx had a terrible time coming to our house. We had a very narrow driveway that had a lot of turns, and one time they turned over the truck, and it was laying on its side. I was stuck at the airport in Raleigh-Durham. My husband was supposed to pick me up. 6 hours later, I was picked up. Uber didn't exist then. Yeah, I could have taken a cab, but that probably wasn't a good deal because that would have been an hour and a half cab ride. But if we had had drones, I wouldn't have had to worry about that. The drone would have done it. The driver wouldn't have turned over his truck. The driver probably would have parked in a central location and sent out all these drones to these areas. So what I envision, and Oliver, you correct me if I'm wrong because I don't delve in that area quite as much, is that the driver is going to get into a central location and say, okay, drone X, you go here, drone Y, you go here, drone, and he's monitoring, he or she is monitoring all these drones, making sure they get to it and that they come back. And then he'll go to the next place, or she will go to the next place. I do use he as the generic he, please. But we need to understand how that is because we have to be able to envision what it's going to be. I love dealing with students, especially younger students, because they can see technology that I can't even envision. 3D printers. I used to work for Hewlett-Packard. 3D printers was one of their mainstays. And they actually do a lot of 3D printing. They were even doing technology where they were doing 3D printing of their laptops. They didn't work very well initially, but there's no doubt in my mind it'll get there. And then there's a commercial right now that's out where a kid is playing with an iPad, and I guess the mother or the aunt says, "How do you like your computer?" And she says, "What's a computer?" It's a whole new terminology. I call everything a computer. My mother calls everything a computer. My mother's scared to death of a computer, and I just tell her it's a mechanical typewriter is all it is, Mom. You can't break it. But I look at what my mother is doing with her PC, and I'm thinking, wow, what am I going to be doing when I'm 80 years old? I'm 61, so. But let's go back to IoT and artificial intelligence. So you have this driver in the car, okay? And the driver is monitoring it because we haven't got the laws yet to say it can be completely selfless, so automated, where it's driving by itself. And all of a sudden, I brought this up before, you have a pedestrian, and the pedestrian just stepped out in front of you, but you can't move over because there's a car over there. So what does the car do? Now, has it been programmed? What's the ethical thing for it to do? Hit the car and maybe kill somebody in that car, or hit the passenger or maybe the pedestrian and maybe hit and kill the pedestrian? These are things that we have to deal with in the last mile. It is. What happens if a drone goes down? Or if the drone is about to crash and it sees it's going to hit somebody or it's going to hit a house? That one probably it would hit the house. You could put that into the programming. But going back to the car, does the person take it over and decide? Or do you let that car do it? Or the driverless, whatever, truck, car. We did have an incident where Google, one of the Google cars, there was an accident and somebody was killed. Now it came out, had the driver not taken over and let the car do its thing, most likely that person wouldn't have died. So is it bless you, is it technology that we put more emphasis in, or do we let the human value put into it and maybe make the wrong decision? It's an ethical dilemma that we have to deal with, okay? Now, when I say driverless cars and the drones and all of that, there are still human beings in the background. There are also driverless ships. Again, I'll bring back, because there's new people in here. We had the incident of the U.S. Navy where they had two ships that collided, and it was the U.S. Navy's fault, and we had 17 people die, 17 sailors. That was tragic. Now, there's been a lot of things that came out of the Navy, and I'm a former naval officer, so it hurts me terribly to say that my Navy is doing this, but it is. My son is a ship driver in the Navy, and he's getting ready to deploy here soon. But he tells me that there's no training, there's lack of training. The tempo has gotten so high that people can't come back and train. They're constantly out at sea. Look at what's going on. We've got Afghanistan, we've got the Middle East, we've got, and you think Afghanistan, well, they don't really have water, but the tempo is for the ships, and you have SEALs out there and everything else, but you have North Korea happening now. People need to sleep. Technology doesn't. But technology breaks, so you have to have technology people there doing the last mile. So I hope to empower you to think that we need to put ethical decisions when we're doing the coding of these new IoT things, because I foresee that IoT and transportation can resolve many of the issues that we have. Think about hunger. Think about different things in the world. Traffic congestion. Maybe traffic congestion will go away. I think Uber is wonderful, because I think when I can no longer drive, I can use Uber or Lyft or whatever comes out. And maybe the next time it's a driverless car. Do I step into that driverless car? I don't know that I can, but it's going to get me to my last mile or last 10 miles wherever I went. I went Uber this morning to the train station because my husband is got a cast on a leg and can't drive me, so I Ubered to the train station. But if it were driverless, I'm thinking, I don't know that I would jump in. Who am I going to talk to? That's one of the great things about going with somebody in there. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Ollie.
Okay. Thank you. We're all talking about the same thing. And the impacts. I'm focused on impacts of what's happening here with all our new technology. And all this cool technology, as you said, all the IoT stuff, driverless cars, these things, the Ubers, you call them, does have impacts. One of the things I want to focus on, again, I bring out my phone, I know where that truck is. I know exactly where that truck is on the road. All truck driving companies know now. All suppliers know. Walmart knows where the truck is. That's delivering supplies to them. So does Target. So do all the major suppliers. Kroger knows where it is. Now, there are things that happen along the way. There's snow here. There's a lot of snow there. That might freeze over. There are a lot of things that happen. A truck driver might not arrive on time because, there's a wreck on Interstate 95. Years ago, I was stuck on Interstate 95 for 8 hours when the black powder truck turned over on the mixing bowl at Springfield. I was one of those people who sat for 8 hours on Interstate 95 right outside Springfield. Couldn't get off. 8 hours. Thank God I had some food and water with me. 8 hours. Truck drivers who were in that lane were late for delivery. What came out in the newspaper this week, Wall Street Journal, I'll give the source. You cannot be late anymore. You cannot be early anymore. You're supposed to arrive with your load at 3 a.m. Truck drivers. All this new technology, all this Google technology tells me as Kroger or Walmart where exactly those supplies are from or are at. Now Walmart, my last estimate was about 250,000 trucks are on the road 24/7 delivering goods to Walmart grocery stores, to other stores. They deliver to 7-Elevens too. Kroger, a nice grocery store, is now going to use this technology to creatively impact the business of trucking industry. If you want to start a trucking industry, and some of my students do, I applaud them for doing it. There are a lot of regulations. Here's something that's not a regulations. It's an impact of the technology. Kroger is going to fine you $500 if your delivery is late. Now you get 48 hours to deliver loads of groceries to a grocery store. What if there's a bridge out? What if there's weather? What if somebody hits you? What if whatever can go wrong? You have a flat tire. Something goes wrong with your truck. You better anticipate that as a driver, as the driving company. Now, my little company had 9 trucks, and so we didn't make a lot of money, but we made a decent living. until 2008, and fuel prices doubled. Fuel prices doubled. That killed a lot of companies. But you can get fined $500. If you're supposed to be there at Kroger in 48 hours and you were there 49 hours, that's okay. You do it a second time, not okay. $500. Now, what's the profit for that truck driver? Around $500, maybe $1,000 if you're lucky. Walmart is now starting to levy, or it says in the Wall Street Journal article, going to start levying fines of 3% on delivering cargo. Per month, that could be upwards of $1 million for a private trucking company. 3% of the cargo value. Those tractor trailers have a lot of stuff in it. You know how many tubes of toothpaste you can stack into that thing? It can hold 60,000 pounds to 80,000 pounds of cargo. And a little teeny tube of toothpaste, you can stack a lot of them in there, and it costs a lot of money. Walmart will fine you now. So to be a truck driver, you got to be on time. You got to use this artificial intelligence, all these Google things. Look at the weather. You've got to look at the weather chart. I really love driving, as you probably do, with my iPhone. I don't drive anywhere anymore. I don't even walk to this place anymore. I had my headset on this morning. I felt kind of silly. It's my first time. I put my headset in because I wasn't sure where to go. I'd never been here from DuPont Circle. So I put my little headset in, hit walk, and it led me right here, foot by foot by foot, turn right, go down, turn right, and here I was in 5 minutes. It's like really cool. People thought I was listening to music, as all my other people were doing. I used it. So these truck drivers are going to be using this technology, but the Walmart, the customers, are also using it. The last mile factor has become more important in many ways. Not only can you get stuff to you better, faster, but now the person delivering it may have a problem. Also, this driverless cars, driverless trucks. We're estimating, I think it's a Wall Street Journal article. I look for that for a lot of transportation stories. They estimate that the driverless trucks will kill about 1 million jobs. You know how many drivers we got around here in the United States? A couple of million, maybe. We lost over 1 million since 2008, 2010. They're baby boomers. I'm a baby boomer. And they retired from that career. Now they're doing other things. A lot of them are coming back to class. One of the things that I think we need to plan for, as we look at all this IoT, technology, driverless cars, is preparing for the unknown unknowns. It's not something I made up. Ernest Hemingway did it first. And then Robert McNamara, Secretary of Defense, used it with the whiz kids when he hired them on and said, for these young men out of college, I know what the known knowns are. Known knowns. This is a watch. It's working. That's a known fact. It's a fact. You can see it's a watch. It's working. Things moving. I told you it's working. I could be lying, but more than likely I'm not. There are unknown knowns or known unknowns. Okay? There's some things we're kind of like, I'm not sure what the weather's going to be like tomorrow, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be like today. Although I think my wife said it might be raining this weekend. Might be raining. It might not rain. Then there are the unknown unknowns. A lot of professors call it the unks. The unknown unknowns is not something we just throw out. It is what we need to focus on with AI, with all the new technology that's coming. You see me pull the phone out again. You see me holding something else in my hand besides a microphone. Okay? It used to be called a number 2 pencil. It is still a number 2 pencil. But it's not the number 2 pencil that's been around for 80 years. This is made in Vietnam. That's where all number 2 pencils come from today that I found out. The number 2 Faber-Castell American pencil had a supply chain of over 650,000 people who touch parts of chemicals and things and wood that finally made the number 2 wooden pencil. The supply chain, very complex. We're all living in a supply chain world. It's very complex. All the things we're using in technology, think carefully about the unknown unknowns. They will impact your life. There are unknown unknowns about your career. I mean, your career will change. All of those in the 20s and 30s and 40s, you will have another career in probably 20 years. You'll be doing something totally different. You may be working in the anti-opioid field. You have no idea what chemistry is, opiates are, but you might luck out working with somebody in marketing that says, can you help us write something because you're smart, you got a college degree, you can write an English sentence. We need somebody that makes sense, and please help us out. That's a fact, by the way. I didn't make that up. I know a young man who majored in accounting and computer science, and that's what he worked in for 15 years. And now he's doing marketing for the anti-opioid drugs, one that was just launched. I think his company just launched today, the first anti-opioid injection. It costs like $1,600 or something. It's very expensive. You'll see it in the newspaper. The governor, I think, of Virginia is going to be in a big meeting today. It is Friday. Talk about it. But things happened. You need to talk about the unknown unknowns. You will have a different career. That's an unknown unknown. Basically because of technology. This is a key technology. It started in the 60s, eliminating jobs. And it's continuing. But it's going to create new opportunities, so many new opportunities. It's so exciting. And so you need to be educated again, academic, preaching education. You will be in class all your life. I'm 72. I'm still going to class. Actually, I am. I take training classes all the time.
I do too, and I'm 61.
I'm going to turn it over to you again.
Okay.
We do this. Academics are really notorious. We're mathematicians. Notorious for setting each other up. So you'll set it now.
Thank
How
you.
much time we have left?
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Okay.
I'd like to open it up for some discussion. Let's have some questions. Are there any questions? I've been told I have to hand the mic, so.
One thing, if somebody wants to see a last mile delivery system over at 16th and P, there's a hub for these little wheeled wash tubs that are delivering meals, I think. They do still have a person following them, but they're real cute. But I wanted to ask about, back to the driverless cars. If the car comes up from Richmond into this area, are they going to understand about opposite side of the street parking, rush hour parking on 16th Street on only one side, all these kind of things. And then when they find a parking spot that's not restricted to residents during the days and some places on Saturdays, can they parallel park where they don't have dividers? I know. People have hard time. So how's this car going to do it?
That's interesting about the little things that deliver meals, but Ollie, you want to entertain that one?
I could talk for 8 hours. That's why I became a teacher, I guess, or they gave it to me.
I'll give it to you first and then
All right. Changing jobs. You just identified, I mean, I was up here in D.C. from the 60s when I first started working. Come on in.
Is there a third seat? I'll make one.
There's a third, right there. There's your third seat.
All right.
There's your third seat. I'll stand. I'll take my glasses so I can see. The question just came out from the audience here about what if you have this driverless car comes up, driverless car, artificial, wash tub, comes up here from Richmond, and what about, does it know about, can it parallel park on certain days or park different ways? You got all these rules and regulations that are on these signs. Or there are little stickers that come out, the police say, okay, here's a sticker today, nah, we got a parade coming.
There's signs that only have the little boxes.
Yeah. What I talked about before is exactly what you're talking about now. A new job would be created because someone's going to say, like you, this is a problem. And so can we use technology?
Street View is probably the...
That's a computer program. That means the person making the policy down here in the city on parking, they've got to work with a computer programmer at Google or somewhere to upload, like on when you're driving up from Richmond, and you're driving 95 and you got the map, all of a sudden it gives you a notice. I-95 is blocked at Fredericksburg. Take 301. So you know automatically, it automatically tells you what to do. If it was artificial intelligence, it would probably get off and reroute to 301 and come up and go around the wreck. But what is going to happen is, it must happen, if that's going to be a reality and you want it, and all of you want it, because we all want these things, someone's going to have a new job created to write new computer programming rules that goes into Google, goes into the cloud, that allows that car to say, or that cart to say, yeah, on Saturday or 3 o'clock, I can do this. On Friday at 3 o'clock, I can't do this. So it's going to create jobs. So it's a very good question, very good question. I'll turn it over to you to answer it also.
Okay.
And
Then we'll turn it over to Candice. Okay. Yes, as Oliver said, it'll create jobs. And yes, I think what will happen is just like California has standards, emission standards on their cars now, and you have to have those if you sell the car in California, but yet every other state doesn't have it. And if you move to California, then you have to upgrade your car. I think what's going to happen is that we're going to see that each state will have federal guidelines, but then each state will have its own laws on how to deal with cars. And if you go and rent a car, or if I have a car, and I decide I want to go to Washington, D.C., but yet my car is not empowered to do all of the cloud for Washington, D.C., excuse me, then I won't be able to go. I will be stopped. The engine will stop. Something will happen that won't allow me to go in. But yes, it'll create a new job. And this is Candice.
Please introduce yourself, Candice.
All right. Well, my name is Candice Wyatt. I'm one of the professors of many that are here today at APUS. And I have to apologize because I was sitting downstairs and I think there was some miscommunication as to whether or not we were going to start at 10 or we were going to dismiss. So I was actually downstairs enjoying the other conversation. Yeah, yes, so I'm here now. So first, let me apologize. Now, secondly, I know we were talking about how policy is going to shape the future. And my area of expertise is how is driverless technology going to shape the future? So I'm not sure how many of you just heard the keynote speaker, but he talked about driving around the island of Puerto Rico in the midst of all of the devastation. Think about how driverless technology could have helped that situation, could have delivered goods and services to those individuals in a more timely manner. So the thought is, how do we take the knowledge that we have and apply it to some of today's standards as well as tomorrow's standards? Now, with that being said, that's a little bit about my background. What was the question again? And I can see if I can address it based off of my background. You did? Oh, okay, it's been addressed. Okay, so I know that we had a wonderful graphic, and it's behind me, and I think we've probably covered just about all of this. But one of the things that I wanted to highlight is that this is recently in the news, that there are actually now places in Germany and in Europe that literally are having cars that are driverless, and they are now transporting people. They're calling it Uber 2.0. Okay, and so the question is that how are we going to take that technology and one, move it to the United States, but then also use it for the greater good? For example, is there going to be a need for ambulances as we know it in the next 5 or 10 years? Do you still need a staff, or do you literally just need a person that can be transported but using driverless technology from one location to the next? I'm sure you all have touched on some of the other images in this picture, but look at the one in the top left, where you have the concentric circles around the vehicles. Another thing to think about with driverless technology is how are the vehicles not only going to get from point A to point B, but how are they going to communicate with each other? What about our accident rates? Do you think our accident rates will change for the good or for not good based off of driverless technology? There have currently been some articles in the news that talked about a couple of fatalities due to testing of the driverless technology. So I think these are just a couple of the things that we should think about as we're shaping policy, as we're thinking about our infrastructure, as we're thinking about the best ways to use taxpayer money for the greater good in terms of transportation and logistics. How about that?
Yeah, there were a bunch of questions.
A bunch of questions, okay.
We have to.
Do my Monty Hall here. Thank you.
I'm Tyson Slocum. I direct the energy program at Public Citizen, and I'm doing a session after this on disruptive changes in the electricity sector. So I'm very curious about everything going on in the transportation sector. I see kind of 7 key opportunities and challenges for the driverless revolution, if you will. One is, and there are competing studies that sometimes illustrate that there are benefits or overstated benefits or risks with some of these things. I mean, one obviously is, what is the purpose of driverless cars? What are the expected benefits? And so what I've heard is increased transportation efficiency. That requires an increase in kind of system coordination with driverless cars through that system, and you need high penetration rates. And so when is that going to be achievable, and at what cost? I've also heard conflicting research on the climate and environmental benefits. Some say that there are unquestionably positive ones. There are others that raise doubts about that, and I was wondering what your views are. There's also a raging debate around public interest versus proprietary nature of some of these technologies. These are all being developed right now in secret, company by company. There is little to no sharing with public entities. Are these technologies being maximized for the public interest or for the private interest of the developers? Equity. We've already heard of Mountain View, California canceling bus lanes because they said we don't need buses, it's all going to be driverless. What are the equity impacts for access to transportation? Are we creating a new digital divide, as Bill Clinton warned in the 1990s? Who pays for infrastructure? Right now, municipalities are shouldering the burden. What is the most equitable form of payment for that infrastructure? Privacy issues, who controls the data in these things? And of course, security about what happens, hacking and other system intrusions. That was a very long question, but I didn't hear any of those issues really addressed in the opening discussion. Thanks.
Okay, how much time do we have?
About 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay, no, you go ahead and start.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
By all means.
Okay. So I'll try to address one of the 7. So a recent study was issued that said that more and more millennials are purchasing less and less vehicles. Okay, so extrapolate that to driverless technology. So like you said, there may be some cities who are looking forward and saying, well, maybe buses aren't the technology of the future. Ubers, Lyft, share rides, bike shares. Maybe there's other forms of transportation that can address tomorrow's needs today. So I think that having a forward thinking when it comes to transportation is really important. And I agree with you. Many times you have to look at the researcher to tell whether or not there might be some inherent biases with some of the information that that is released. As you mentioned, the internet is our best friend and our best enemy. There are times where you have information that conflicts, is very conflicting in terms of what's going to happen with our transportation systems. But looking at millennials, looking at our aging population, and looking at what is the actual need for an individual to own a vehicle, I think those are some of the conversations that we need to have right now in terms of how driverless technology is going to fit into not only today, but tomorrow as well.
I'll do it quickly. Just one, the equity. That canceling the buses, they got poor people out there who don't have all this money and stuff. They need a bus. You see these stories all the time of bus routes being, in Richmond where I live, they're rerouting bus routes because they don't make enough money. Well, guess who's suffering? The waitress, the person who's cleaning your room in the hotel you stayed at. They can't get to work anymore. They're out of money now. They may live in a project house and they've got good benefits right now. There's a digital divide. Yeah, you're right, there is a digital divide. I have a relative who's 65 years old. He has never, ever used a computer, scared to death of it. We got him a flip phone. He calls it a telephone. He has never used it. He never will. He's a smart guy. He's a really bright guy. He's a painter. That's all he does. He don't do manual labor. But he's part of a digital divide. He's part of it's a lost generation that's out there. And we could lose a lot of people in a kind of a lost generation of this digital divide technology.
I'll address the technology and the proprietary issues. When HDTV came out, there were all kinds of different HD TVs, and one finally overcame the rest. I think we'll probably see maybe two or three different technologies come out to the forefront. And then of those, I believe the government's going to have to step in and make them talk to each other, because unless they talk to each other, we're going to have these concentric circles that are just going to compete, and they're not going to know what the other car is saying. And then, you have mass pandemonium and mass disaster. We were talking about mass disaster earlier, and that's what you don't need, is all of these driverless cars crashing because they can't talk to each other. So the government, I think, is going to have to step in once we get to that point where we have two or three competing different ways. Either they learn to talk to each other, or one takes over.
And to piggyback again on what you said, there is going to be a need for government oversight. You mentioned hacking. And so having these technologies interact with themselves, but in a manner that cannot be susceptible to so many things, is going to be really important. So coming up with policy to address how all of this is going to work together in the future, I think is going to be paramount. So to your issue of hacking, in my opinion, there is going to be some need for a federal government oversight in terms of how we are going to ensure that these technologies are not manipulated.
Maybe one more question, if any.
So we want to revolutionize the world with technology. However, again, someone addressed that people might fall behind. How might we make, driverless cars specifically more accessible to the public who can't, financially, and other things as well?
I live here in the Washington, D.C. area, and many of the public transportation systems are subsidized. So federal government employees, or even those who work for private corporations, they are encouraged to use public transportation, and they receive a discount in some cases at little to no cost. So I would see some type of program of that nature helping those who may not be able to afford the high-end technologies that are coming. So we need to make sure that no matter what technology comes, it's accessible to everyone. And subsidies may be one way to enable that.
Regarding the technology part, I have a mother that is scared to death. I mean, she can't even use a conversion system that says if you want X, press 1, if you want Y, press 2. That absolutely just scares her to death. So I think we have to make the technology where it's ubiquitous. So if I want to call by a regular telephone, I can still get it. She'll take a taxi over Uber because she has a flip phone. You were talking about flip phones. She's scared to death of the smartphones. She will not have one. So we have to be able to build in all the different technologies to accommodate digital divide, because not everybody's going to be able to afford, or they're scared of it. I try to think about how I'll be when I'm 80 years old. Will I be scared to death of the technology? So
I'll let you know in 8 years. Your answer, I think the answer, what you said, is going to be policy. You need to talk, the government has to step in and realize there's a huge population in the digital divide that's lost to technology. Not everybody is texting 300, 500 times a day. The older generation is not. There's a younger generation that may not because they're just poor and have no opportunity.
Thank you all very much for coming this morning. I hope you found that as informative as I did, and thanks to each of my APUS colleagues for their participation. I'm sure they'll be happy to take any other questions as long as they're here this morning. So,
Thank you for coming.
Thanks again.
Thank you for coming.